And we have participants today from Brazil and Australia, as well as the UK. And the point of these live sessions is actually to augment the materials that our TFF Challenge finalist teams are going through on our digital labs. And the digital labs, as we all know, is the first of its kind 21st century accelerator that's really optimized to meet the needs of the next generation of food and ag entrepreneurs in every part of the world. So what we're trying to do is really like bring practical skills in fun and interactive formats that really like help these entrepreneurs elevate their projects to the next level. And the purpose of today's conversation is to talk about something I think that's a challenge for every startup, no matter what they say, which is like how to go to market and how to do this successfully. So I can imagine this scenario because we've all been in it. We have a great idea, great technology, we've put together an amazing pitch deck. We're talking to investors, but the time has come where we need to like launch and get some customers. And so we want to get real and share some practical insights from your experience, both working in a large corporation as well as in a startup and in the investment community, about like how these entrepreneurs, who by the way are like doing all kinds of diverse things throughout the food system as its whole, but just that kind of like high level insight about what everyone can learn, at a practical level. So first, before we go into some of the questions that I have, I wanted to just have you talk a little bit about who you are. And you have a very interesting background that's very varied. And so maybe you can give us, a short and sweet intro to all of the amazing things that you've done in your life, and, the experience that you bring to Thought for Food.
Well, all right. So, where to start? So my background is quite diverse. Started my career with 7 years in the Israeli Air Force, building the technologies, putting satellites in space, blowing up rockets, those kind of easy things. After that, law school and startups in the mobile internet, early 2000s space. And then I went to business school at INSEAD, followed by biotech and pharmaceuticals in the Netherlands with a company called Cell, which we sold to Johnson & Johnson, doing infectious diseases and therapeutic proteins. After that, joined Syngenta, where we met. Yep. Joined Syngenta initially as the, as the company went through an interesting transition where water was a big topic, but strategically it wasn't really clear what the company should do. Syngenta being a seed and crop protection company, it wasn't very clear what specifically the company should be doing in the water space. Now, what is the water space? It's droughts, it's floods, it's genetics and drought tolerance, it's irrigation, it's everything that's ag techy today in terms of monitoring crops. All these different options were on the table, or actually just beginning. This is 2008, 2009. So basically I built the strategy for Syngenta and then the business that started in this space, which then moved from just talking about water to talking about all the abiotic stresses or environmental stresses. So nutrition, heat, cold, and so on. Was with Syngenta for about 7 years. We built that whole thing into what's called crop enhancement, and I think
it's worthwhile pointing out, by the way, that your name Peleg means water, right?
Name of water, yes.
There you go. It was meant to be job.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. It all makes perfect sense in hindsight. Amongst my other, let's say, water sport hobbies like scuba diving and sailing, which I did cross the Atlantic Ocean sailing. So water has been a good part of my life. What else? So actually, after Syngenta, I became an operating partner for a private equity firm based in New York. I actually did another project also with Bain Capital. And then about a year and a half ago, joined BlendHub, where I am today, as the president and chief commercial officer, to basically help scale BlendHub. BlendHub is a 23-year-old company, but it's somewhat of a startup as well. So if I had to describe what we do, when you think about the world of food and how fast it's changing, and actually that rate of change is accelerating, when you think about the latest things like Impossible Burgers
Mm.
or quinoa and pea protein and low sugar and vegan and plant-based and all those different things that keep popping up, and every day is something else, and CBD yesterday and almond milks tomorrow.
Yeah.
The rate of change is accelerating, but production systems have primarily stayed the same for the last 20, 30 years or even more. So what BlendHub has done, similar to Amazon, let's say when Amazon was really good at managing servers and all that kind of stuff for its e-commerce business, it started Amazon Web Services, right? To offer a lot of other companies to stay away from infrastructure and actually focus on what they do best, which was an app or some other software, right? Without the need to invest in CapEx and infrastructure and a lot of people to manage servers and networks and all that kind of stuff. So BlendHub did the same. It was an ingredients company that did a lot of blended powders and was doing this so well that actually it decided to invest in more technology and turn that into a service. So the last 18 months or so, we've turned into a service company, which we work with startups as well as high-end, well, let's say the large-scale Nestle's, Unilevers, and so on of the world, and helping and innovate fast, scale production really, really fast, and go global with our global network of production hubs or factories, food factories that are identical, modular, and basically enable everyone, again, from a startup or literally a guy or a girl, to beat the big guys on the level playing field. We can talk a lot about the technologies that are embedded in that, all the, let's say, Industry 4.0 applied to food that we do, but at the concept, or let's say the main value proposition was that. And it actually leads me a little bit to kind of the topic of today of how do we do that, right? How do you deal with large-scale companies that have 17 bureaucracy if you're lucky, only 17, usually more, and convincing, again, a company like a PepsiCo, a Nestle, a Kraft, a Kellogg, whoever, a Cargill, to work with you and start, versus if you're dealing with a guy or a very small company that just wants to get in the market, right? So we add those as customers, although we're doing the same, right? So that's a little bit about my experience. I guess I'll let you run the agenda now.
Well, no, I think that's super interesting to talk about a little bit, which is, I mean, now you're doing service. So first of all, I'd love to hear kind of what aha moment in your company, because it's, I mean, it is kind of funny to hear a 23-year-old startup, right? But like, I mean, that is almost a mentality that you're adopting, I guess, more than really being a startup, right? It's just being agile and kind of innovative. And what was the moment that like this kind of new concept of being a service provider for all kinds of food companies? How did that happen? And then how did you decide, or did you decide which ones to go for? So, you know, now getting into the topic of today, like going to market, how did you like segment the market and figure out like what your play was going to be exactly?
All right, so we'll start with the first part, which is how did that come about? Actually, it came about way before my time in the company. So Henrik, who is the founder of BlendHub, which you have met, or at least virtually met, right?
Virtually, yes. Fascinating guy, everyone. Go connect with him on LinkedIn.
He's a true thought leader and really brilliant, genius kind of guy that thinks way ahead of his time. Actually, Henrik built a company for blending of basically blended powders, food powders. What is that? It could be anything from, again, think of anything from baby food to soups to dairy products, the emulsifiers, the stabilizers, all these kind of products. In his mind, he wanted to serve the small, medium enterprises that comprise, let's say, 80% or more of the food production in the world, right? So there are the 100 big brands that we all know, but there are 500 million very small to medium enterprises around the world that are in the agri-food value chain. So when he thought about that, he thought, okay, I need a factory that is actually versatile, right? It needs to be able to produce small batches, medium batches, So think from a bag to a pallet to a truckload, right?
Yeah.
It's different than from being a, and I'll quote Nestle, it doesn't matter
An
which,
industrial production kind of system. Yeah.
thousands of tons and
Right. And they get economies of scale as a result, which these small guys don't necessarily get if they're just doing small batches, right?
but if you just want to do a market test, right? If
Yeah.
you're a startup or even a big company that wants to try different
Mhm.
things, right? You need to work at a small scale and be able to be agile,
Right.
so he thought, okay, that's how I'll build it, and built his factory, put his own money. Took him about 3 years to build with a lot of growing pains and a lot of challenges because all the machinery companies in this space are used to working with quote unquote the Nestle's,
Right.
right? So they're not used to something that needs to be versatile, that needs to be agile, that needs to service all this kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
took him 3 years and a lot of headaches. And when he finished, he basically said, okay, this cannot be, right? The industry cannot really work like this in the long term. And this is 15 years ago. And he decided to take a team of engineers and task them to redesign the factory, a 4-story building, for blended food powders, which is gravity based. So think about this: you take the raw materials, you get them all the way up to the top floor, and then it trickles down by gravity, right? And all the stops are done throughout the way. It gets packaged in the bottom, right? After a lot of work has been done, redesign that. Now that entire production fits into something that we ship today in containers of 40 feet. So it's really a very disruptive model, right? That you take that kind of building into something that's small, which you can deploy very fast with a lot of technology and quality parameters and everything else that's inside. But you asked about the mindset, right? So one was to go from static factories, as we call them, to these portable units, right? Mm-hmm. Then it is to create a network of these units that actually sort of act like one factory.
Right.
Right? So you have contingency plans because, right, all these factories are identical, and if one shuts down for whatever reason, from an earthquake, an ash cloud over Europe, or a strike at the port, or any other thing, the others can pick up some of that workload. On the other hand, you could play tariffs better. You can localize production and be so closer to the raw materials, right? So there's a lot of benefits in being that agile and small and so on, and it's a modular system. So you may need 1 unit or 2 or 4 and so on in every location.
And like, dumb question here, just on the, like, how it works. So if, for example, because you guys have deployed your, blending facilities, these modular facilities in countries like Mexico and India, right? And Africa. Yep. And so,
in Africa, not yet, but it's on the way.
But it's on the way. Okay. But like the idea could be like a consortium or like a cooperative of a bunch of food companies could, I guess, invest in this? Is that how it would work? Like how exactly, who's buying and building these?
So we go back to, it's a service, right? So do you care how many servers or where is actually the server that hosts your Dropbox account?
No.
Not really, right? You care that there's a system out there in the cloud that can do what you need where you need it. And if you're in Malaysia today or tomorrow, it doesn't matter. So we own and operate all these factories today. We deploy them, and then companies can use them. We are also now developing a franchise model where someone like yourself, let's say, would want to open a factory in Basel. How would you do that? Or a person in Kenya would like to support the local economy and develop that. How would that look like? And then they could actually finance this, open up their own hub, which will be part of our network and can service different companies. The beauty is that once you're part of the network, right, a company in the US that wants to enter into the Kenyan market, right, has a factory that someone else is operating, and you can launch. Right? Mm-hmm. And the whole paradigm is changing also, because if you're a startup, so let's say that we wanted to develop the TFF pancake mix, right? Or meal
based pancake mix.
Yeah, why not, right? How would you do it? In principle, today, or at least historically, most companies would find a place, produce that, and start to ship that all over the world. If you're talking about liquid products, it's even worse because you're shipping water around the world,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
With our production system, you could basically go into one of our locations, develop your product, we'll help you design it, and you could be on the market in 90 days. Now, the beautiful thing is that you can be on the market in Spain. And again, historically, you would think, okay, I'll make it in Spain, and then I'll ship it to the US, I'll ship it to Germany, or I'll ship it to India, and so on. With us, you can produce it the same day in all locations, right?
Wow.
So there's no more this sequential path to market. It's actually a parallel path to market. And our teams around the world can actually help you with the distribution, with the links to Amazon, with sourcing of raw materials. Because again, if you wanted to source in India, do you know someone in India? Would you trust in India?
So,
That for you,
yeah,
etc.
just like getting really specific, because we are working with a number of companies this year. And I'm even like the part of the board of one specific company that are using like new crops and underutilized crops. And so let's take, moringa or fonio or something like this. So these guys right now in what you just described would basically be limited if they were just like, okay, sourcing the crop from their growers, producing it themselves, creating the flour or whatever and shipping it. But by working with you, they could like source from a bunch of different places and produce like more of their product, right? And deploy globally
Yeah. So
in a
let's
matter
assume
of days.
some people from Brazil, right, that are
Yeah.
listening. So if you were in Brazil, and even if you developed everything in Brazil, is a big market, but most companies, especially startups, would not think about, okay, I need to open up the Indian market or the Australian market, or I'll do that after I'm successful here, then I'll work there. And instead, with us, once you have it and you validate it in one market, or actually in one hub, that's not even the market yet, we can help you scale that very quickly across the globe. Whether it's by Amazon, or whether it's with the local retailers. So in Colombia, we'll connect you with Éxito, and in Mexico, it will be to the relevant brands, or even to Costco and Walmart, online, not online.
And so you said that you like are also helping to source the raw material. So you have relationships in all of these countries with growers and, oh, wow.
Well, not with growers, because we don't do the powdering part. So we usually go down that far. But we do have, recently we sourced, in Mexico, we had a company that needed coconut cream and these kind of things. So we actually did some work to source that directly from Sri Lanka for them into Mexico. So all these kind of things to really help, again, mostly the startups, because the big companies know how to do this.
Yeah, they have the economies of scale. Yeah.
Yeah, but even they sometimes say, oh, I want to open up whatever the market in Ecuador, may not have the right access, or it might be just too cumbersome. So we usually have a guy who just goes, listen, if you could do this for us, it will be much better because it will move much faster. If I have to get my supply chain guys, it will take way too long. Actually leads me to another thing, which is once we've been validated, and let's say over the last year or so, we've been validated by Unilever, PepsiCo, Nestle, Cargill, Yum Brands, and many others. What happens is that, they all see plant-based, just as an example, right? Plant-based drinks, almond milk, right? What usually happens is the marketing guys of the big companies get excited. They want to produce that. They want to be the first runners or the second runners, right? They have competition, and they feel like they're behind. So they go to their supply chain guys and say, hey, make this for me. And the supply chain guys go, we don't know this. And don't forget, a company like Nestle would have 300 plus factories. It's not that they don't have abilities, capabilities, and fantastic people. They do, and they have all the money in the world. But they're focused on what they've done in the past, and the stuff that's already in R&D and all these kind of things. So they actually end up, by the time they are able to produce it, they need to change an existing factory or build a new factory and all these kind of things that take time and a lot of money and a lot of committees. So 3-4 years go by until they're able to do that. And we know that trends are changing so fast. So they get to the point where eventually they buy a company, right? Because it's easier to buy an Impossible Burger or Beyond Meat or whatever, even if it's expensive.
Yeah.
But it's easier to do that than to try and change all the stuff. And don't forget that nobody knows how long these trends will last, right? So by the time you build it, 3 years later, it might be gone. Somebody might find it wrong, right? Because everything is hot for a while, and then critics come, and you may want it today and don't want it tomorrow. So when do you build a factory, don't build a factory, launch it, don't launch it? All these kind of questions keep coming up.
Right.
That's true for startups as well. So when you develop the latest and greatest thing, also you need to think about that in 3 years, you might not. So how fast can you move, and how do you generate value, or are you too limited, or are you too broad? All these things. But basically, these big companies suffer from the same problem. Well, they suffer from a problem, which is they can't move fast enough. All right. So we always said this also when we were at Syngenta and other companies.
Super tanker, trying to change.
Super tanker or an aircraft carrier or whatever, and you have a speedboat next to you, and the speedboat moves very fast but can't pull something this big. On the other hand, once a super tanker turns into a specific direction, it puts all its weight behind it, right? So there are pluses and minuses, but I think the world is becoming much more agile. If you think of the last couple of years and think 10 years ahead, then the rate of change is only going to get larger. It's going to be more products, more trends, and so on.
I think what you just said is such an important point, and I just want to reiterate that because, we have attendees now from all parts of the world. By the way, everyone, if you have a question, please type it into the chat or into the Q&A, and I'll be sure to get to those. But I just want to reiterate the point that you made, Peleg, about you have the product of the, moment that's so exciting, and everybody's excited about it, and the investors are coming, and the, customers are coming. But 3 years from now, what happens if that trend changes? What are you going to do next? I think that's an important point for all entrepreneurs to be thinking of, is you have to always stay innovative and ahead of the market and look towards solutions that can help you do that, such as BlendHub and, other types of enabling platforms. But let's start here from the standpoint of where many of our entrepreneurs are, which is okay, they're in the very early stages of this, and they're figuring out, like I said at the outset of the call, they might have a promising technology or a prototype or even, a product that is on the market, but they're trying to figure out really what is the go-to-market strategy? Who should they be targeting? Who should they be focusing their efforts on? How, what advice can you give people about how to build that strategy in the right way? And, in what you're saying, it's almost like you could be thinking global from the outset. Should they be? Or should they be thinking small? And then at what stage are you thinking big, etc.?
So I guess there are several questions when you think about that. Because, of course, if you're talking ag, it's different than you're talking food.
That's true. Yeah.
It moves at a different pace. And again, how much, focus you can have, right? So when you talk about B2C, it's different than you're talking B2B. But let me go back to basics, okay? So for me, when you really start off, we all have an idea and a perception of what that could be, right? I think it's really relevant for this or that market. I would urge everyone to think about what, we started at Syngenta, which was the CRISP model. So CRISP is CRYSP, cost, risk, yield, simplicity, price. Okay, so when you think about, I have a product, I will create value, right, to my customer. Cost, can I reduce their costs, right? Risk, can I reduce their risk? Yield, can I improve their yield, get them more money, more production, etc., right? Simplicity, can I increase their simplicity or reduce their complexity, is another way to look at it. And price, can they get a better price for their product because it's a premium product now, or the quality is better, or they can make better marketing decisions about it so they can price it better, right? Those 5 categories actually enable you to think a lot about your customer base and try to kind of refine, let's say, your value proposition, right? What am I really selling here? If you can't, I will be very, let's say, straightforward about this. When someone comes to me and can't show me one of those in a quantifiable way, for me, they can sell probably something, but they're going to be lucky.
Is it just one of them that you should be addressing, or many?
Excuse me?
In the CRISP framework, are you supposed to go after one, or should you go after many?
Well, more than one is better.
Okay.
But if you can, but
Yeah.
and take any product, right? And let's take an example, right? So when we develop drought tolerant seeds, right, corn seeds, we're talking really about a few things, right? It's not about cost, actually. It's about risk, right? But what is the product profile for a drought tolerant seed, right? So people think, and then I'll take that as a very crystal clear example because we're talking ag, for example, right? So how much drought is drought, right? What is the product profile? And again, in the eyes of the customer, not in my eyes, right?
Right.
So a drought is 10% less water, 20% less water, 40, 50, whatever, right? But what does the product have to do, right? In a normal year when there's no drought, it needs to do the same as any other seed, or better, or worse, because it's got input to it.
Right.
Or in a bad year when there's drought, it's also not 100%, you won't lose anything, or it's okay to lose 10% while everybody else loses 50%, right? So you need to understand that risk profile. What are you adding here, right? But it's really around risk, right? And the yield, you could say, is equivalent or part of that equation too, right? But if you're bringing them a solution that reduces their complexity and how they manage the farm, right, and may or may not have cost reduction automatically, but time is money and all those kind of things, right? So if it's just, okay, we'll get you higher yield, is a very simplistic one. But as you start to look at those 5 buckets, it kind of helps you, like I said, refine your value proposition, and enables you also to price it better, right? And again, looking at it from the eyes of your customer. Now, you asked the question, how would you segment the market, right? So actually, the good news is today you have a lot of tools. You have a lot of market research and data and whatever. Some is not so great, but generally speaking, there's a lot of information, right? So when I look at segmenting a market, the question is, segmenting where can I bring most value, and especially for a startup, where can I showcase that value in the very short term, right? And you could really look, and now let's go to food. We just did recently a strategic kind of targeting, and we started with, where can we build a big business, right? So it doesn't mean that day one we'll build a big business, but over the next 5 years, we believe that each of these segments should deliver whatever, X million dollars, right? And then you break it down to, okay, how would we do that, right? One is the overall market. Then within that market, where do we bring value? And again, if it's, again, take plant-based, right? Okay, the market for plant-based, what do we expect it to be? There's a lot of studies around this. But even within plant-based, okay, are you talking about plant-based drinks? Plant-based ice creams, plant-based burgers, and where is the market going? Because it's easy to get also sucked into the hype of the US market, for example. But it doesn't mean that in Brazil it would look the same, or in India it would look the same, but you could also see certain trends follow a certain kind of trajectory, right? Started here, it moves there, the adoption, it's at a different rate, but it still comes. So looking a bit forward, you get to see that happening, or at least you can envision that. So if you're investing in building a market, and especially as we said, now you could go everywhere at once, doesn't mean that everywhere grows at the same rate.
Of course,
You're looking at things that generally scale, right? Again, you talk about food, or if you talk about ag, again, certain crops are more prevalent in one place or another, or certain allergies are more relevant in one place or another, right? Just as an example, in Colombia now, they sell more lactose-free milk than normal milk. And everybody says that they're lactose intolerant, but they all eat ice cream normally, right? So is it really a health issue, or is it a perception issue, and these kind of things? So, right? So you need to start to understand the market, but and let's say the data is one part, but then go comes the second part, which is really important, which is go talk to your customers, right? And do the legwork and learn from them. And I'll give you an example from my experience, again, going back to water and the Corn Belt in the US, right? We developed a solution for farmers, and I remember we tried to price it. And we knew that we could save the farmers some water. Mm. And we believed that according to the data that we had, we can reduce their water by 2 acre inches, which was about 25% of their added water at the time. And we knew that an acre inch will be worth $10, according to market studies. So if you do the math, 2 acre inches times $10, we could save them $10 per acre, sorry, $20 per acre. And we thought, okay, that's one of those buckets, right? So under cost, risk, so on, we could save them on the cost side, $20. And I went and talked to farmers in Nebraska, Kansas, and Colorado, and I said, so if we could save you 2 acre inches and we would save you $20, would that be great? And how much would you pay for that? And all of them looked at me with a bit of a smile and said, I'll never save that water. And not for a lot of different reasons. One was, if I don't spend the water, I lose my water rights. So I need to allocate that water, and I want to use it because otherwise I lose it. So next year I won't have it. So that's one which just showed you that it's not even relevant, right? The argument that I had in my head was just not right.
So yeah, you were thinking like, oh, I'm going to save these guys all this money, and that wasn't even something that they were worried about because of
But what they did have in their mind, and they said, you know what? I'll save the 2 acre inches on this farm, on this field, but then I'll apply it to that field, right? So here I'll make good yields, and that will be great.
Yeah.
Because the technology we bring to them, they will still maintain higher yields while reducing the water, but then they'll use this water in this other field.
Other place, yeah.
From whatever it was, 100 bushels to 140. So if they get another 40 bushels, even at $4 corn, that was $160. So I was thinking, oh, great, I'm saving them 20. And they're thinking, no, I'm going to make 140, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of considerations that you may think sitting at your desk, right, that this is how those farmers behave in every part of the world, right? You'd have, or you may have different considerations, right? So
it's like finding that balance though, because I think it's like definitely what you said. It's like if you talk to your customers and hear every idea and insight that they have, you can start just like designing only for those needs. But then you look at some, mega innovators like Tesla and things, and they're like, we're going to build things and kind of convince the customers to come with us. And I think it's like in this space, it's a lot about finding the balance, right? About like also meeting the unmet or the unknown unknowns, right? And the unmet needs, right?
Yeah, so in many cases, the farmers won't even know what to ask.
Right.
If you want, they won't know how to define it. But once you have an idea and once you think, go talk, right? Yeah. And go validate that this actually makes sense to them because they're the ones who pay for it. And the other thing is, especially in agriculture, people, I think, usually forget that farmers.
Yeah.
No, but usually farmers, people think of farmers as with a romantic view on farming.
Mm-hmm.
It's the guy on the red tractor with a straw hat. But they're not. They're businessmen. They live with way more risk than anyone that lives in the city. Mm. They live every year might be a bankrupt year, right? For a lot of them. If it's not survival or subsistence farmers, that of course it's the other way. It's even worse, right? So when you go and talk to them, you also need to realize, again, the kind of realities that they live in. I've seen a lot of companies, and I'll say this to this community, a lot of the ag tech folks that say, oh, I'm going to make the farmer smarter, right? Which basically you're telling them kind of like, they're kind of stupid, right? And even if you think that, be careful how you say that.
Yeah.
But when you go and talk to them, don't forget that the customer has been farming for generations usually. They know their and better than you
Yeah.
in many respects. And it's true that you may be able to add some value,
Right.
right? Because you do have insights and other things that are relevant. But it's a very different. You have to think very, in a very detailed way on how you position that.
Yeah, and
And
we
then,
talk a lot in TFF about like customer empathy. And I remember looking at a case study, in business school about Burton, the snowboard company, and like how they would actually like have snowboarders be part of their like R&D teams, etc., to really, really understand the mindset, needs, and expectations of snowboarders. And I think that's something too. I mean, we talk a lot in TFF about like the food system is very local. And so like also just like understanding the nuance between a Colombian market, and their lactose-free demands and an India market or wherever, is really important. Yeah.
and there are a lot of examples like this, right? Actually, I just heard Joe Gebbia 2 days ago, is the founder of an Airbnb, talking about how actually they were doing really lousy, and someone told them go talk to the ones who are using. So they were doing $200 a week in revenue. Okay, and this was in the very early days, and they didn't know how to grow the business. And an advisor just told them, where are your customers? And they said, oh, they're in New York, and they were in California. And he said, okay, go talk to them.
Yeah.
So they went and talked to them, and a lot of these guys told them, hey, this could be better. And they changed a little bit, and they iterated. So every other week or whatever, every weekend, they fly over to New York, go meet some customers. And he was joking about it. He says, imagine Steve Jobs coming and knocking on your door and say, hi, we're like that.
How's your phone today? Yeah.
but that's kind of what they did. Right.
That's
for a while,
amazing.
they got into and how they improved the product to make sure they had a market product fit.
Yeah.
But actually, we started saying something earlier, which I wanted to get back to, which is, and again, I'll focus on ag, but it's true in other areas.
Mm-hmm.
When you go in and try, right, you have to remember. So I go back to, we have software or an ag tech product, whatever it is, that will help the farmer.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, who is your customer?
Yeah.
Is it the owner of the farm? Is it the operator of the farm? Is this the agronomist? Is this the distributor of crop protection and seeds that actually gives them a lot of advice and selects the product for him anyway?
Right.
There's a lot. Is it the son or the daughter of the owner that are actually going to inherit the farm? And they're much more worried about it, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people, influencers, on these decisions that you need to think about. Okay, so imagine again, you have the product that it works fantastically and shows that the agronomist was actually messing up for the last 20 years, right? And imagine how that looks in the eyes of the agronomist, that this might make him look bad. So, and he knows the field and all that. What will he say, right? And it's not about not including him. It's actually making him your friend and saying, listen, we have a tool here, Mr. or Miss Agronomist, that will actually enable you to do your job faster, better, more accurate, whatever.
Yeah.
Right? And then suddenly he's your customer, as opposed to the owner, that if the owner thinks, oh, I don't need my agronomist anymore, of course the agronomist will stand on their back legs and fight it, right? And say, oh, this is crap, come on.
Collaboration. I love this. That's very like much of our TFF ethos, right? Is like, you can do this in friendly ways and like find these unconventional partners and collaborators and evangelists, right, for your product to really help you, make strides into the market.
Yeah,
and I know for a big company, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, but it relates more to, again, we talked about customers and how you enter the market. You need to figure out
who is the customer. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because actually today a lot of farmers would rather spend most of their time in front of the computer, right, making decisions, as opposed to, and actually to get, again, this is for large scale farmers, not subsistence farmers or small farmers, but if you're contracting with Cargill, whoever, right, you'd make much more money selling to them at the right time.
Yeah.
Right. 1% more on your crop in terms of value.
Right.
easier than getting it in the right marketing decision of your crop, as opposed to 1% in the actual field, right? That requires a lot of agronomy and all that kind of thing, right?
And
so
just,
so that's an important kind of analysis, right? To think about how you approach it, right? And identifying the right customer, getting your value proposition right for that customer, right? If you don't have to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, if you're a farmer, that might be a fantastic value proposition because you can manage your time better. On the other hand, if that farmer loves waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and watching the sunrise, you might be, preaching the wrong thing and pricing it the wrong way. And again, is it the farmer, the owner, the agronomist, and so on, to really find the right ways? And it leads me to another point, which is who that farmer listens to, right? So to your point, do I need the university, extension services to actually be part of my tribe? There's an important point that we've actually now implemented also, and I'll take this now to a completely different level. When you try something with someone, should you charge for it or not?
Right.
Right? Because we have the tendency to say, no, let's just try it. And that's true in many cases. You just want someone to try. But when you give something for free, it's usually undervalued. Right? And people just go, I don't care. They won't put the, but if they paid a little bit for it, they'll want to justify to themselves or their boss why they've done that. And we want to get to that ROI on that stuff. Right? So we've actually had a lot of cases when customers said, oh, I'd like to try it, and we did it for free. And you end up wasting a lot of your time and effort. Sometimes you learn, but you do spend a lot of time and effort with someone who's maybe not that serious.
Right.
So that's the other side of the equation. Another comment that I'm reminded of is when we talk about the CRISP model, right? So cost and yield, right, and price are actually real numbers.
Right.
Right? Because you could do the analysis of how much that is.
Yeah.
Right? However, when you talk about risk and simplicity, it's sometimes hard to price. Right? So actually, if you remember John Blazing, he and I would always talk about these as the real intangibles. Right? It was really around that. Because for us, we don't know exactly what the number is, how much risk is risk, and how do you quantify that, and it's sometimes difficult, but for a farmer, those are real things.
Absolutely.
Right? We all understand when something is simple or not, and that's why we have so many apps, because they presumably make our life simpler. Right? And in one step, I can do what someone else does in 3 steps, and so that's another part of thinking through what value, because sometimes those are the biggest values.
Yeah, totally.
But they're hard.
They're harder to quantify and make a case for. I want to underpin like some of the examples you gave with some real life examples that I've gone through, and then we have a question from our community. But one thing is that, I was working for a startup that had developed a software product that they thought would be very relevant for R&D teams in large agribusiness companies. But what they soon realized was, or what we soon realized was, in talking to the R&D teams, it was like outsourcing, important R&D, proprietary information, and, competitive advantage. We thought, oh, we nailed it. This is going to be our go-to-market strategy. These guys are going to, pay us millions and millions of dollars for this. And, actually it was like, we did not even realize how sensitive this would be. And interestingly, then it was like, okay, what if we talk to sustainability teams in these companies, right? And then they see a little bit more of like the value prop from the get-go of some of the modeling and things that we were doing. So it's just, I just want to underpin your point about like really defining your customers. And you might get it wrong at first and think that this is the person who you're delivering the most value to, but they might not be the right ones. And so it's important to get out, talk, and, shift as quickly as possible when you can. Yeah.
And I'll give you, or I'll reinforce your point. You asked me earlier, when we talk to startups or when we talk to the big companies, right? If you talk about innovation. So again, the marketing people get excited. But the supply chain guys go, how can I deal with this, right? if you talk, so you have to sell the marketing people to drive the organization.
Right.
They need to do their internal work. On the other hand, when we talk about optimizing production, right, and replicating and moving fast, which will make the life of the supply chain guy easier, right? Then we're talking supply chain guys and trying to get. So it leads me to the most important thing, right? And this is to all the technicians out there, right? Business is people, right? It is all about the people. It is all about the politics. It is all about the stuff that we think is bad. It's not bad.
Yeah.
That's the way the world works.
Yeah.
Right? So if, and I'll take it to these places where if you think you have a great product, but it will actually put someone out of a job, and you're pitching to that person, right? So imagine you're pitching Dropbox to the IT department that has a lot of people managing servers and disks and all that stuff.
Yeah.
This is great for them, and they're going to lose my job.
Right.
It's not that it's not true. It might actually be important for the corporation, but then you sell it to the right person that understands it, and not the protective one that will say, we should never accept this because this is going to, I'll get fired. We had the same, like I said, we're offering production services. So some of the chain guys go, wait a minute.
Wait a second. That's what we do. Yeah, exactly. So, but you can still get there. It's about, and as Lucas typed in the chat, it's a lot about emotion and communication and nailing that like interaction, that human interaction. And he has a great story he typed in here about a farmer that he spent over 2 hours talking and explaining about the tech, but they closed the sale only after the guy's mother entered the room and told him about the vibe and the good people and how our product would make his life better and easier. And I think, there's so many stories like this, and sometimes it does just come down to that human interaction, which I think a lot of tech companies have lost sight of a lot of times. I can't even tell you how surprised I am when I talk to accelerators and, they're getting, they're, dipping their toe in agriculture, and they don't require teams to go talk to growers, etc. And so it's just really like fascinating to me how sometimes like we are in our little, bubbles, and it's so important to get out and talk, and then also nail that like human factor in how we go to market. I want to get to this question, but really quick, I just wanted to talk about, you said the point about where can I bring the most value and how can I showcase that? And I want you to put your investor hat on here for a minute, because again, I'm talking from some real life experience that I had where there's a really promising opportunity for impacting, a grower or like a population, for example, that's underserved. But the investor is looking at value from the standpoint of like investor value, right? ROI and stuff. And so often I've seen impact-focused startups refocus their priorities as they go to market based on investor feedback they had. And in the agriculture space, it's like, oh, you're doing a plant breeding technology, you have to go into corn and soy. Like that's, that because of the scalability and da-da-da. And so how do you like help, these purpose-driven entrepreneurs who want to make impact, not get kind of like tricked back into that paradigm about delivering value, in the conventional way, which is like very focused, right, in specific areas in the food system, or in like right now it's all plant-based proteins. And what if I am a sustainable livestock company, for example? Like what, how do you just get into this?
Yeah, I guess there's no simple answer to that, to be honest, because I think the first question is, who is your investor, right? Because you need to choose your investor. Now, sometimes you may not have a choice, or you can't be picky because you really want to move and someone is there, and that's okay. But you also need to have a right fit with your investor, right? So actually in the last few years, there's been this flow of a lot of new investors that thought ag and food and all this stuff is kind of cool, and it's an asset class that they haven't been to, so they want to expand into that, but they don't know enough about it, right? So if it's, because in the past people will talk about, right, smart money and not smart money, right? Right? Smart money in the tech industry in general is one that can connect you to the large players or who is going to buy you and all that kind of stuff, right? Bring a lot of people with a lot of know-how that actually help you move faster.
Right.
And when you take someone who doesn't know ag,
Yeah.
they get scared very quickly.
Right.
Right. And it's cyclical and it's a slow moving industry and all these kind of things. So there's not always that kind of depth. So you have to be careful kind of who you choose as your investor.
Right.
And if you're, let's say, the content matter expert, then you want to focus on these crops that are underutilized or underinvested in, then you have to basically present that case, right? Because I think, I don't know, an important part is you're going to invest all your life into this startup, right? So you want to position that right and not go in there in the morning and say, I really don't work on this crop, but hey, I have to. That will never work in the long run. It could work in the long run. But actually, as you were saying this, there was another thing that I wanted to highlight when you were saying something before, which was if you are developing an R&D tool, or a breeding tool, or all these kind of things that actually may take a long time for that ROI for investors, you also need to explain that, right? And be very clear about what is the applicability, but also who's really, so if you're doing a breeding program that only the 5-6 largest companies in the world are actually going to use, your target market is actually very well defined, right? But to tailor to that, but you kind of know that that's limited. Right. If you're saying, so the flip side is everybody's now, every high school student can use CRISPR. The answer is yes, but to get to a product on the market, so if you're actually counting on royalties and all these kind of things, right? It's not that, all these high school students that develop something doesn't mean that I really want to eat that tomato that they've genetically modified, or whatever, right? Again, there's pluses and minuses to everything. But I go back to your point one is choose your investors from the beginning or position it for the right investor. So if you're going after impact, there are impact investors that get it. If you're going for traditional investors that just want a return, also position it right.
And I guess it's just like I said, I've seen so many startups kind of like change their product focus and their go-to-market strategy based on investor input, which maybe sometimes makes
But that's not necessarily bad.
I know, exactly. Sometimes it can make sense. But oftentimes, you have to question and figure out like also your message to investors as well as to your customer, right? That really shows the value, going back to what you were saying, like how can I bring the most value and how can I showcase that? And the other thing that I really liked what you talk about is like the free trial, right? Like as you're trying to build excitement for your product and get also experience with launching it, etc. I agree with you that a lot of wasted time and effort, and I see it time and time again with startups that I work with, that they, go through these pilot projects. I think that something that is worthwhile exploring for our entrepreneurs here, and I'm happy to set up, some sessions with experts in this, are like these kind of benefit sharing models. I've seen them work before where it's really like, okay, we're going to go into this risky endeavor together as partners, and we're going to look at the value that's delivered at the end and come up with a payback model, right? That shares that value back to us. And so basically you're like, each taking on some risk, right? And you're basically both incentivized to deliver value at the end of the day. And if you trust that person, right, like that, you can both look at the result of your pilot together and say value was delivered, here's what it was worth to us. Sometimes you can get even more paid than what the transactional negotiation would have delivered up front. And I think that's just something to keep in mind as a tool that you might want to explore.
I think you're right, and I would, the only thing that is, I don't think it has to be done based on do you trust that person, because this is very ambiguous, right?
Right.
But on the other hand, the way I've done it in the past is actually say, whatever, this will cost you $1,000, but if it materializes and you become my customer, I'll rebate that.
Yeah, exactly. There's some great incentive structures. Yeah.
Very small. But the other thing is you also make people understand that you're a professional. So when you give something away, people say, oh, yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Right? Well, if I have to take your resources and use them, would you let me do that for free?
Sure.
probably not going to happen in most cases, right?
Yeah.
Why do you expect me to deploy my resources for free?
Yeah.
So I take all the risk myself. So
exactly. Yeah.
this, I'm going to work with you. Hopefully, we generate value.
Right.
And more, again, it's positioning yourself as a professional, as someone who is serious, and to just say, listen, because let's assume that even take an example where somebody works with you, and after a few weeks or a few months, they decide that they have other priorities.
Absolutely.
For the right reasons, doesn't matter. So you've spent all your life's work, right, and time and make it work, and they decide, hey, I got other priorities. Can happen, has happened. The only thing, just say, listen, if that happens, you can walk away, I can walk away, that's okay, but I won't feel like you screw me over.
Right?
Yeah. And you define it up front, so it's not, they're not doing you a favor.
Yeah.
They can also demand stuff from you. You can demand stuff from them. It's a relationship that you define as very professional from day one.
Yeah.
Or if you have a friend that has a farm that he's willing to for you and all that kind of stuff, do that as well. But you got to be careful, because especially when they're your friend, and it's nice, but it's by they might do it. They say they want to help you, but they don't have the time to help you. All these other things come into play.
Yeah, it's all about, and I think that's actually worth a module in the Digital Labs, about the power of contracting upfront, and every relationship that you have as an entrepreneur with your co-founders, with your friends that you're going to do pilots with customers and potential customers, and all of this. It's hard. It's a hard skill, because you just want to go out and do, but it's really important to have some of this stuff buttoned up, because it can get through some complicated issues when you have things on paper. I want to get to this question we have from Serge, who says that they're selling a super energy farina at an affordable price. But when we went to collect feedback for consumers, some of them asked us to reduce the price while we know that the price we fixed is the right and reasonable one. Can you share with us your experience on what to do in this situation where you are okay, we know this is the right price we should be selling this for, but customers are telling us they want it cheaper, but that's not possible. What do you do?
So I guess there are different ways to look at this. One is, first of all, maybe they're right. It means that they're not valuing what you're bringing to them enough, right? So if they don't believe it's worth that money, then you may have a problem, right? And maybe it's a problem that the product doesn't give enough value, or the perception of the value is not highlighted enough.
Right.
So, and by the way, every customer in the world, including yourself, will always want a lower price, right?
Yeah.
So part of this is just normal negotiation to say, that's the price. I'll give you another example. When we sell now what we sell, and people say, oh, but I can use someone cheaper. You have to decide, if you're selling a car, are you selling a Tesla or are you selling a Fiat? And one of my Italian friends will always say, why do you go after Fiat all the time? But Ferrari is also owned by Fiat. But my point is, you have to figure out what is the product you're selling. And if you're selling a Tesla, don't position it like a Fiat. And when someone comes and says, but I can get a Fiat, you can say, okay, then it's okay to also tell a customer, you're not my right kind of customer.
Yeah. I think the other thing I would say to Serge is maybe, in that crisp, framework, you're talking to someone that's just buying for price. And to Peleg's point, I mean, maybe there's another value prop that there's another customer that will pay a premium for because of the attribute of being, an energy providing product, or it's sustainable, or, there's a transparent supply chain, or whatever that may be. Those are also attributes that you can build into your marketing, right? To command a different type of customer who might be willing to pay what is the price that you want to sell for.
But I think it's a great question, by the way, because we all encounter it. I don't care who you are. Mm-hmm. There's always going to be someone who's going to say, I want it cheaper. So you also have to figure out, and really willing to give it at a lower price just to get traction. But it's very hard to raise prices after you kind of anchored it low. So in that case, and I've done this actually recently as well, as we say, okay, here's an introductory price for the first
Yeah.
purchase, for the first 6 months, for the first whatever, to enable you to raise prices later, but get them hooked, right? Those are, let's say, contractual or commercial strategies, and think of how you get into the market. There is the element of positioning it right, or maybe you're not highlighting the value enough, right? And sometimes, what's the value of a glass of water? If you go here to a restaurant, right, and you ask for a glass of water, and you usually get it for free, right? In most Western countries, where you want to define them. What's the price of a glass of water when you're stuck in the Sahara? Or, is millions, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Depends
well,
on
this pricing strategy is a whole other module that we could do too, I think. So,
right. But my point at the end of this is you got to find, again, the product market fit. You got to position it right. You got to highlight the right value. And sometimes it's also okay to say, hey guys, this is my price. I can go and argue with Apple as much as I want. This is right. I might find a sale, but right. But you want my product? That's the price. Done. Of course, as a startup, everybody expects startups to be more agile and cave, right? And basically give you it for free, give you it for almost free. I think that, again, for me, one of the important things is if you know your market, if you know your product, and if you've done the homework, right? And you can say, you're in the Sahara, right? And you're suffering from this, this, and this. You want to tell me that this glass of water is not worth $1,000?
Yeah.
And then fine, I'll sell it to you for 900. Right. But I don't sell it for 9. If you understand your customer and you've had those conversations and you look them in the eye and you show them that you understand their business, I think in most cases, at least, they'll understand it. And again, they might want something, because also don't forget, when you're a startup, they're taking a risk on you as well.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a good point. Yeah, exactly.
Because you may not be able to service them, or you may not be around in a year.
Right.
So you also think about their wasting time. So you have to find that balance. I will say one thing, and I say this often, is you have to, and I'll say this again, you have to think about long term. And when I mean that, what I'm saying is you got to think about long term in terms of relationships. Okay, so if you screw up your relationships with your customers, if you screw them over, or if you just think, oh, I'll round this corner, those things tend to come back and bite you. And it's true with, like I said, it's people, right? So if you've screwed over a farmer or overpromised and you didn't deliver, that farmer is burnt for the next 3 years. And he will tell all his friends or her friends, right? That he's tried and those guys suck, right? Think about it. And whoever thinks the world is big and they won't find out, the answer is they will. So like any other place in the world today, think very hard about, how you're behaving, because customer relationships matter, and they matter for the long term.
Right. Very good advice to end on. It's been, as usual, a super fascinating hour with you, Peleg, like learning more about Blend Hub. And I think like there's hopefully we're going to see you guys at the TFF Summit, but I definitely think we have an ongoing relationship, and there's a huge opportunity for so many of our TFF teams, right, in working together with Blend Hub and some of the interesting things that you're doing with startups in Spain and in other parts of the world. So more on that to come from TFF, and then also to learn from your experience, from the investment side, from the big corporate side, and obviously from the 23-year-old startup side. But really like understanding the key takeaways for me are like really this, crisp model, understanding your customer and like defining clearly who that is. And, the power of this empathy and, communication, and really being effective in selling your product and going to market. So thank you so much for your time. Before we end, any last words that you would like to share with our TFF Challenge participants who are in the final stretch of the challenge? Pitches are due at the end of this month, but maybe just some final words from you.
I would say couple things. One is, of course, I'm a big supporter. I've been since the beginning. So, happy to host people, and if they want to come and see and, try out stuff, we're always happy to do that. I would say this, after we've done and talked about all this kind of stuff, don't live in a void,
Yeah.
because it's very also easy to kind of bury yourself in your own work, not knowing that the world is evolving around you. So there's a lot of things that happen. So don't not just talk to customers, talk to the community, talk to other people in the industry, because sometimes you'll find that someone else is doing exactly the same thing on the other side of the world, which could be a competitor, but also might be a fantastic collaborator.
That is what we live for in our TFF Digital Labs, is the power of community and collaborating, right, in these new ways. So that's absolutely what we're trying to foster. So great advice. Thank you so much. I hope to see you soon. And anyone, if you have further questions, send them to Marie or me, and we'll make sure to pass them on to Peleg. And good luck with all of your projects in this final stretch. And we will be back soon with another live session in AMA. Bye.